we're doing 80% of the work. And we're not developing new leaders. And even when you volunteer in these organizations, you can be stagnant in your role, and no one's investing in you, no one's growing you, and things can be fairly unclear. So we're going to talk about 4 basic principles that we want to be enacting when we're developing leaders. So this is going to apply to literally every single role in the church, whether you're the senior pastor, whether you're a board member, whether you're the head of usher team number 2, or if you're just one of the ushers on usher team number 2. Some basic principles that we can use so we develop leaders to develop leaders to develop leaders. And it applies to all ages. One of the big mistakes people make is that you have to be this tall to ride the leadership train. And so we don't develop leaders when they're young. And so we end up with very, very immature and inexperienced young people. That's our fault, that's not theirs. Some of our best churches have realized that leadership development can happen in preschool. So in preschool, now, it's little leadership development, but just getting these kids who aren't even in elementary school to help the teacher help clean up. Just teaching them to serve, teaching them to follow. And that can start when they're very, very, very young. So that's what we're going to talk about right now with some of these key principles. So the first area we want to talk about is responsibility. When you're given some kind of job, some kind of role, we want to make this as clear as possible. First of all, especially in the church, when we give somebody a responsibility, that responsibility needs to accomplish the mission. I talked, before about our jobs to get Joe Pagan and make him look like the Apostle Paul, but sometimes we've got programs and systems and roles that don't actually move the ball down the field at all, that it's misaligned. And when we have a lack of alignment, it's just like the tires in your car. When all the wheels in your car are aligned, your car goes down the road straight and efficiently. When they're misaligned and going in slightly different directions, you burn out your tires, you wreck your suspension, and the faster you go down the road, the more unstable the car. So we want to make sure that when we're giving somebody a responsibility, that responsibility is lined up with the mission. We can say, oh yeah, this helps us accomplish that. Responsibility needs to be based on outcomes, not tasks. So there will be tasks to do as part of the responsibility, but that's not what it's based on. The foundation is what we're doing to accomplish that mission. So if you're one of my youth pastors, I am going to describe your responsibility as your responsibility is to see teenagers come here, meet Jesus, be developed to maturity so they can reach more teenagers to come here and meet Jesus. So those are the outcomes. Now the tasks are going to be used to support the outcomes, but not the other way around. It's outcomes that are most important. And even if you're, again, part of usher team number 2, I'm going to describe your responsibility by the outcome. And the outcome is anybody who walks into this room feels loved, feels welcome, feels accepted, and is able to find a place to sit without undue stress. Now the tasks are going to flow out of that. So one of the tasks I'm going to teach my ushers is I don't want a new person walking in and having to say, excuse me, can you make room for me? No. That causes stress. Our job is allowed to do that without stress. So my task as an usher is to do that because it's based on that outcome. So you want outcome-based responsibilities. Our responsibilities need to be described in such a way that they would have measurable results. How do I even know I'm doing my responsibility? How do I know this? Now, in some areas it's easier than others. So this can be tricky depending on what you're doing. But if you're one of my youth pastors, well, if the responsibility is to see new kids come here, meet Jesus, and be discipled so they can reach more new kids, how many new kids are coming? How many new kids are meeting Jesus? How many new kids are then ending up in our Bible studies or our Sunday school classes? So we need to have some kind of measurable results. Are we actually doing what we're trying to do? Responsibility also needs to clarify relationships. So it's not going to be just based on sort of tasks, do this, but it's how we relate to people. So one of the things I like to talk about with teams is 360-degree relationships, which means how do I relate to the people I serve? How do I relate to the people I serve with? And how do I relate to the people I serve under? So put myself in the usher shoes again. How do I relate to the people I serve? Well, I want them to feel welcome, loved, and accepted. That's my relationship with people I serve. So, if you've got an usher, what are you doing here? Okay, that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility includes that relationship. What's my responsibility to the people I serve with? Well, the responsibility I serve with is to be loving and supporting with the rest of my usher team. What is my relational responsibility I serve under? Well, to be a good team player and listen to my coach. I've had one of my churches, they've had a problem with, I'll end up rebel ushers. Tony didn't come on Sunday. Hey, can you cover Tony's door? No, this is my door. Nobody's telling me what to do. Okay, we need to make sure that those relationships are clarified as a responsibility, that when you serve on our usher teams, we're good team players, and if the coach says, hey, you need to serve at this other door, we're going to serve at that other door. Now, I've coached football, and if you've got a wide receiver who decides, yeah, I don't really like that play, I'm not going to go down and in, I'm going to go down and out. Okay, that's a recipe for an interception. That's really bad. So we need to make those responsibilities, those relational responsibilities, also very clear when we're giving somebody responsibility. Now, sometimes we give people responsibilities, but we give them responsibility without authority. Whenever someone gives you responsibility without authority, there's several predictable things that often happen. First is improvement is impossible, and stagnation is inevitable. Now, why is improvement impossible? I haven't given you the authority to improve anything. Improvement means changing something. So if you don't have the authority to tweak or change something, you're just going to do what you're told. You're not going to be able to make any improvements. And when we have an organization, we've got a body, we have a church where people aren't allowed to make improvements, stagnation is always going to be what happens. When you're given responsibility without authority, morale will decrease and turnover will be high. When we treat people like they're just cogs, do this, do that, do this, do that, it goes against their very God-given nature. People are not cogs in a machine. They are men and women made in the very image of God. When we treat them like parts of machinery, that goes against who God made them to be. And so they're not going to be very happy. And you're going to get a lot of them quitting. When you have responsibility without authority, it will create a culture of clock watchers. People who do the bare minimum. So the people you keep who don't leave, okay, if you're going to treat me like a cog, I'm going to act like a cog. Now you may have even seen this at places you've worked, where you have some place you work, where it's just, we're just here doing the bare minimum. When you give people responsibility without authority, this is a recipe for church decline. Especially if you do this with your senior pastor. I've been in some churches, now it's a minority of churches, but in some, where the senior pastor is viewed as like a hired hand. You do what we tell you to do, how we tell you to do it. You're not our leader, you're our hireling. Those churches never grow. Decline is what always happens there. All right. What happens when you do give somebody that measure of authority with their responsibility? Well, when we give people authority, it infuses the organization with creativity and momentum. So as soon as you give me a measure of authority in my role, I'm allowed to make improvements. And once I'm allowed to make improvements, you know what? Now I can be creative. Now I can add value to what I'm doing. I can be creative, create momentum. We can start moving. People will have a stake in the game. They'll be personally invested in their role. They'll take ownership of their role. They'll take what I call positive pride in their role. So not I'm better than you, but I feel good about being an usher or a Sunday school teacher, or Bible school leader, or whatever the role is. That, you know what, this is my role. It opens the door to excellence. Now, it doesn't necessarily create excellence, but it opens the door. Why? Because we now have that ability to make improvements. It allows timely and agile decision making. So I'll still run with our usher. Say our ushers notice that most people are right-handed. And so when you're coming into the room, if I stand on this side of the door, I can catch people's hands when they're coming in the door. But when the service is over and I'm back at my post and I'm standing on this side of the door, it's kind of hard to catch people's hands. Most people don't shake my hand. What if, on the way out, I switch sides of the door? Okay. If I don't have any authority, then I need to bump up that decision, to maybe my team lead, who might have to bump it up, to whoever's in charge of the host teams, who might have to bump it up to the pastor. Maybe we're going to have a board meeting about it. That's not timely. That's not agile. When we've given them that measure of authority over that role, then you know what? All I have to do is talk about it with the rest of the team and my team lead. Okay. Now we can make a decision to make an improvement without a big, long process. It gives valuable decision-making experience to rising leaders. When you have micromanaging organization, you never have leaders because nobody gets leadership experience. Leadership is a lot like swimming. It's hard to learn how to swim by reading a book. If you want to learn how to swim, you actually have to get in the water. If you want to train somebody how to be a leader, you have to give them some kind of leadership experience, some decision-making skills. You also get decisions being made by the most qualified people. So let's talk about our usher team. When we're giving them that measure of authority, who are the ones who are ushering all the time and have the most experience and skill and knowledge about ushering? Generally, the ushers. If we have to bump it up, so it ends up in a board meeting where none of our board members are ushers, we're having people making a decision about something they really don't know anything about. And whenever you're in any organization where decisions are being made by people who don't know what they're talking about, that's always a bad thing. We always want decisions being made by the people who know the most about the thing. I don't know any of you what your work history's been like, but have you ever had the experience that you as a frontline worker know what's going on, but the decision is being made by some Yahoo in Edmonton in some office a million miles away? Okay. That doesn't set anybody up for the win. When we give our frontline people that measure of authority, you're having decisions being made by the most qualified people. And quite frankly, if you happen to be one of those leaders, this will save you valuable time. I remember as a young pastor, I went and worked at a church as an interim pastor, kind of like Pastor Bob here, at a small country church in Ontario. And the first time we went there, the first board meeting, they had a 45-minute debate in the boardroom about whether we should use the medium or the small coffee cups for coffee for church after Sunday. Eventually, and this was a light bulb moment for me as a young pastor, I raised the question like, here in this church, is there somebody actually in charge of coffee? And says, oh yeah, well, Sheila is. Is Sheila a complete idiot? No. Well, why don't we let Sheila pick the cup of coffee and she picks it? Why are we as leaders taking 45 minutes to discuss something that Sheila can make decide by herself? Because that 45 minutes we spent discussing coffee cups is 45 minutes we can't spend discussing something else. And let me tell you, if you're on a church board that are spending 45 minutes of your time debating about the size of coffee cups, you're not going to be leading the church very well. All right. Now, authority does need to be sufficient and measured. So how do we figure out how much authority to give someone? What are the constraints when we give someone authority? First, we want to give people authority over tasks as much as possible. Once the outcome has been expressed, this is what the outcome of your job is. The individual needs to have some authority on how to best achieve that outcome. Again, they're the ones who are going to be gaining the most experience on that. So we want to give them some basic tasks, but we want to give them some leeway there so they can make those improvements. We want to give them authority over their team. So if you're the head of Usher Team 2, or if you're one of the worship leaders, or whatever your role is, when you have a team of volunteers, you need to be given authority over that team. And that's going to be the composition of that team, so you can recruit that team. The strategy of your team, how are we going to operate here, and the behavior of your team. So if I'm head of Usher Team 2, and I've got one of these rebel ushers, who are like, nobody's going to tell me what to do, and I'm going to frown that everybody comes in here, I need to be able to have the authority to deal with that problem. Otherwise, I'm a lame duck leader. So we need to be giving people authority over their teams. Now, what are the limitations on that authority? First of all, it's relational limits. Our actions often have an impact on others. And because we have to play with the team, some of our decisions have to be collaborative. So sometimes we have to bring people who are either below, beside, or above us in on the discussion. So if I'm that usher figuring out, hey, I came up with that idea that when the service is over, we should shift which side of the door we stand on. Okay, does that affect anybody else on my team? Well, probably, because if I'm the only usher doing that, that might affect them. If I, as the usher, figure like, you know what, the best time to go forward to the front when we're collecting the offering is during the prayer when everybody's eyes are closed, and I'm the only usher who does that, okay, that's going to be weird. So I need to collaborate with my team. If I'm the youth pastor and we have youth on Fridays, but I think youth would be better if we had it on Thursdays instead, but we've got kids club on Thursday, okay, that decision is going to affect the family ministries department. We need to collaborate. So whenever we're making a decision that's going to affect other people, we need to bring them in and on the discussion. So that's the relational limits. All right. Sometimes you're given responsibility and you're given authority, but you're not given accountability. What happens when we're missing accountability in our roles? Well, authority without accountability is kind of like not having goalposts, which leads to mission drift and ineffectiveness due to lack of evaluation. So what I think of is, I remember when I was in elementary school, at recess, and we'd come out of the school, and somebody would be carrying the soccer ball. And it would be in our hands, and then once we're on the grass, we drop the ball, but we haven't taken off our jackets yet to make goalposts. So that's that little window. When we first get out there, we drop the ball, and we just start randomly kicking it around. And there's some kid who's going to kick the ball in a random direction and go, yeah. Okay, did we ever take that kid seriously? No, there were no goalposts. You didn't really score anything. When we don't have goalposts, how can we possibly keep the mission aligned? We don't know what we're trying to achieve. We don't know that as a youth pastor, it's my job to see young people come here, meet Jesus, and be discipled to maturity so they reach more young people. If I don't know that's what the goalpost is, how do I know when we're scoring? we don't know when we're scoring, well, of course we're going to be ineffective, because how do we evaluate if I don't even know what we're trying to do here? So accountability gives us those goalposts. Authority without boundaries leads to chaos. Again, think of elementary school soccer. Once that ball was put on that grass, there was always going to be some dumb kid who would take the ball, you were chasing him, and he would take it out into the road. And we'd say, dude, you're out of bounds. No, yes, you are. You need to bring the ball back. When we didn't have some idea where the boundary was, the game just got dumb. And so when we're giving people authority, they need to know where the goalposts are, but they also need to know where the boundaries are. Without those boundaries, things get chaotic. When we give people authority but with no accountability, if things go off the rails, there are no seatbelts. We see this in churches, we see this in companies, we see this in nations. When there's no accountability structure, doesn't necessarily things are going to go bad, but if they do go bad, you're hooked. All right, what does it look like when we add the accountability element in? First of all, accountability creates momentum. Again, just think about that soccer game. Remember, once we put our jackets down on the grass and made goalposts, all the game was on. Now we had intensity. Now this is for real. You are kick the ball in the random direction, yay! Okay, nobody took that seriously. But once we have the goalposts, now the game is on. It creates momentum. Accountability requires measurements. And if we're not keeping score, that momentum's going to diminish. So we need to know, are we succeeding? Are we doing what we're trying to do? Now in some areas this is easy, some areas this is hard. So the whole process of growing in your faith, okay, that's not easily countable. But there are a few steps that people typically take that helps us know that that's moving along. So if I've made a decision to follow Jesus, okay, I can track that. Am I starting to go to Sunday school, or am I joining a small group? Well, I can probably track that. Am I getting involved with volunteering? Am I actually, giving my time to God? Okay, I can probably track that. So some things we're not going to be able to track super easily, but there's often little components that we can probably figure out. But we want to have some idea of knowing, are we doing this, or are we winning, or are we losing? Accountability maintains standards of excellence. So authority opened the door to excellence, it doesn't create it. And if you have authority without accountability, things can go really bad. Accountability stops it from going really bad. So whether you're talking about, the quality of excellence in ushers, that if you've got an usher who's either breaking the role relationally and is being rude to the other ushers or rude to those above them, or you've got an usher who just doesn't show up on time, misses their shift. Accountability fixes that problem. It maintains that standard of excellence. Accountability maintains alignment. That we're pulling that rope in the same direction. What accountability ultimately does is it still gives you the freedom to innovate, but it no longer gives you the freedom to stagnate. Stagnation is something that gets challenged when we're holding people accountable, we're holding ourselves accountable. Now, what do we want to hold people accountable for? Well, first of all, we want to hold them accountable for outcomes. So, if my job as an usher is that people feel welcome, loved, and accepted and are able to find a seat, are people feeling loved, welcome, accepted, and are able to find a seat? Okay, we want to hold them accountable to that. If my job as youth pastor is to see kids from the community start coming here, meeting Jesus and being discipled, are kids coming from the community here? Are they meeting Jesus? Are they being discipled? So We want to hold people accountable for those outcomes. We want to hold people accountable for relationships and culture. Now, relationships, that's how we treat the people we serve, how we treat the people we serve with, and how we treat the people we serve under. So those are the relationships. And if things are going sideways there, we need to have conversations about that. Now, culture is something that's closely related to this. Some churches have what they call, a value statement or a culture code, which is just sort of, a way of really being clear on what kind of people are we going to be, how we're going to treat each other. So at my last church, we had 10 culture statements, but one of them was, we make each other look good. We are public raving fans, and one-on-one we're helpful coaches. So if I had a problem with somebody, I'm not beaking off to you guys about it. No. I'm a raving fan. If I've got a problem with someone, we're just doing this one-on-one, and when we do, I'm not coming as a critic, but as a helpful coach. So that was one of our cultural values, that around our church, that's how we're going to treat each other. Now, when we get somebody coming in and start throwing somebody under the bus, any one of us could, and anybody of us would, say, whoa. We don't talk about people like that around here. We make each other look good. We are raving fans, and we are helpful coaches. That's how we do it here. So we want to hold people accountable for how they treat people. If you have somebody who is treating people badly, okay, we can't let that slide. What you tolerate becomes the standard. Actually, I'd write that down if I were you, because that's golden. What you tolerate becomes the standard. And if it's okay to talk badly about people, then that's your standard. If it's okay to break promises, that's your standard. If it's okay to come late for my shift, that's your standard. What you tolerate becomes the standard. So we need to be holding people accountable for those things. We want to hold people accountable for leadership development. So this doesn't apply to an usher team too, but it does apply to usher team lead on usher team 2. As a leader of usher team 2, how am I investing in my ushers? How am I helping them grow so when we need an usher team 3, maybe one of my guys can be usher team 3. If I'm leading a small group, who as a small group leader am I investing in my small group who can be a new small group leader as they grow? We've got 4,500 people who live in Barrhead and 6,500 people who live around Barrhead. Jesus loves all of them, right? He died for all of them, and according to my Bible, he wants all of them saved. We're going to do that. We're going to need a lot more ushers. We're going to need a lot more Sunday school teachers. We're going to need a lot more small group leaders. We're going to need a lot more youth volunteers. So we need to be holding our team leads like, who are you investing in? If you're a Sunday school teacher, that's great. Who are you bringing along as an apprentice? If you're a worship leader, that's great. Who are you raising up as an apprentice? So we want to hold people accountable for leadership development and have those conversations. Okay, who are you investing in right now? We want to hold people accountable for evangelism. Now, that won't necessarily apply to every role in the church. It applies certainly to our family ministry people. Are we sharing the gospel to our kids? It applies to our youth. Are we sharing the gospel with teenagers? It applies to lots and lots of things. If you're on the maintenance team, okay, you might not be talking with a lot of people, but we want to be like, if we're not leading people to Jesus, we need to have a talk about that. And it's not necessarily a disciplinary talk. I mean, a problem shooting talk. So if no kids are coming to Christ in our youth group, okay, let's talk about that. How do we solve that? Because that's kind of important. If nobody's being discipled to maturity, okay, let's talk about that. Let's problem solve that. But if we don't talk about it, it's not going to happen. Now lastly, sometimes we're given accountability, and that's great, but we're not given coaching and support along with that accountability. What happens when we're being held accountable, but there is no coaching and support with it? Well, while accountability maintains excellence, it does not create improvement. So accountability is great, it keeps things from slipping, but it doesn't help create that excellence. What does? Well, here's what's going on here. Commanding improvement does not help someone improve. Help helps someone improve. I'll say that again. I know I'm saying something obvious. Commanding improvement doesn't help. Help helps. So if we're hoping for improvement, but we're not helping, that's not helpful. Accountability without support can lead to a culture of negativity. Now, one thing I'm fairly confident in is as soon as I introduce the very word accountability, I am positive that your hearts did not begin to sing. Because when we hear the word accountability, we hear a culture of negativity. When we hear the word accountability, we hear criticism. We hear discipline. Okay, so when we hear that, because we've only seen negative versions of accountability, and that almost always happens when you have accountability without coaching and support. Well, what happens when we add coaching and support into the role? Coaching and support creates ever-climbing levels of excellence. So if I'm the head of Usher Team 2 and you're one of my ushers, and I'm giving you tips, I'm giving you spiritual support, I'm giving you emotional support, I'm investing in you, investing in your abilities. Guess what? You're going to get to be a better and better and better and better usher. It's going to create that ever level of excellence. And if I'm the head of all the host teams, and I'm investing in the leader of Usher Team 2, I'm giving him emotional support, I'm giving him spiritual support, giving him this affirmation, I'm giving him tips and strategies and help on how he can develop his team. Because you know what? We're not just born with the knowledge of how to develop other people and how to raise up leaders. So as I'm investing in that person, that team lead, they're going to get better and better at investing in their teams. Coaching and support gives people tools for the job. I am pretty confident that most of you have had one experience in your life at least where you started a new job or maybe volunteered in a new role in a church and they treated you like a bullet, kind of like fire and forget. And it's like, okay, here's your job, but nobody gave you any tools how to do it. Nobody gave you any instructions how to do it. Well, how did that feel? Like I remember as a 19-year-old kid, just coming back from Bible school, and they said, hey, would you like to teach grade 6 boys Sunday school? And I said, sure. And I said, okay, meet in room number 4 at 9 a.m. And I went into room 4 at 9 a.m. There's a bunch of grade 6 boys, and now what? Like, they're all sitting there looking at me, like, you know, what is this idiot going to do? Well, this idiot didn't know what to do. Nobody gave me any tools for the job. That was a horrible, horrible experience. Coaching and support creates that leadership pipeline that allows for organizational growth. Again, there are thousands of people in this community who don't know Jesus. If we're going to reach them, we're going to need a lot more ushers. We're going to need a lot more soundmen. We're going to need a lot more Sunday school teachers. When we have this coaching and support, that's going to create that pipeline. I might start off as just Joe Usher on Usher Team 2. But because Usher Team 2 leaders investing in me, maybe I can, as we're growing, be the head usher of Usher Team 3. And as I'm investing in all those people, you know what? Maybe I can be the host team leader because we had to go to 2 services. And so for service 2, because the building's so full, now I'm a host team leader. And because someone's still investing in me, when we plant or another campus in West Block, maybe I could be the campus pastor. Okay? Coaching and support creates that leadership pipeline that allows us to grow. What you hear, you forget. What you write down, you remember. What you teach, you know. So I'll tell you a little story. In grade 10, I was very good at math. My grade in math 10 was 53%. I passed by the skin of my teeth. And I knew in my heart of hearts, I didn't have a prayer of passing math 11. So I took remedial math 11. We called it math for dummies. And I took math for dummies and I got 60%. Took math 12 for dummies. I got 70%. But I knew you don't get to go to university with math for dummies. I had to take real math. And so that grade 12 year, first semester I took math for dummies. Then the next semester, real math. And it just so happened in my new class, right here, was this girl named Heather Graham, who was really, really cute and didn't understand what was going on. And the first unit in real math was the unit I just finished last week in Math for Dummies. So like I knew this one unit. So I kind of knew sort of at a 70% level what was going on. And I was just the kind of guy that's going to help her out. So I tried to explain it to her and she didn't quite understand it. So maybe I explained it a different way. Well, as I was explaining to her, the guy behind me, Dale Budding, was also struggling. He said, like that didn't make sense to me. Can you help me? So I started helping Dale as well. And the things that had made sense to Heather didn't make sense to Dale. So I had to think of like, how could outside can explain it? Well, in the process of me teaching them, I learned that unit 10 times better myself. And so when we finished that unit exam, I got the grades back. I had 99%. I looked over the one mistake I made, I added 2 plus 3 and got 6. I was so mad at myself. If I used my fingers, I would have gotten 100%. And before, I remember kids who get 99% and be mad. I feel like, dude, I got 60 and I'm thrilled. What's your problem? And then I was like that guy. Well, the next unit was a brand new unit. I didn't know anything. But let me tell you, I'm going to help Heather out. And that continued on, helping Heather and Dale right to the end of that semester. My final grade in Math 12 was 98%. What you hear, you forget. What you write down, you remember. But what you teach, you know. When you are investing in other people, when you are raising up leaders, they're not the only beneficiary. You grow too. When you're making disciples, you're growing as a disciple. The more you invest in others, the more God invests in you, the more you grow. What you hear, you forget. What you write down, you remember, but what you teach, you know. Does that make sense? When we have an organization, a church with coaching and support, push through the whole church, whether we're talking ushers, we're talking about sound men, we're talking about maintenance teams, throughout the whole church, when we have this culture of clear responsibility, sufficient and measured authority, positive accountability, coaching support, this is going to create enhanced communication. It's going to break down a lot of the silo effect. The whole organization gets better. Now, we're going to break up for a little bit for discussion. Think about your own role in the church. Is your responsibility clear? Are the outcomes clear? Are the relationships clear? What measure of authority have you been given? And is that clear? Who holds you accountable? And to what standard? And lastly, what kind of coaching and support do you receive? So let's talk about that here. And then it's not question 6, but question 6. How could we make this better? Let's talk about that. Actually, let's talk about that